Okay, I don't know where Ivan is, but we're going to start the open mic in about 2 minutes. I'm going to give you the order of the writers. Nathan Castellanos, Antonetta, Ivan is number 3, Paisley is 4, Carla is 5th, and then we have artist Michael Johnson who will end us out. Thank you, Michael, for being here. We're going to start the open mic in about 2 minutes. No. This is the
microphone, you don't have to get close.
Oh, that's right.
There's a shotgun to pick you up anywhere.
Hi, everyone. All right. Do we have... Okay, Nathan Castellanos is outside. Yeah. Yeah, because he's first, so just going to wait for him. Okay.
Nathan's on his way.
Yeah. So he's the first one, and then we can try.
For people doing the open mic, you don't have to really talk very loud into the microphone. It'll pick you up. Okay?
Hi, my name is Nathan Castellanos. I've been writing this book series about gentrification in Los Angeles for about 5 years. It's kind of like this occult slash Jungian psychology slash like social justice type story about a guy named Miguel Leon who, like me, is half Jewish, half Mexican, feels kind of marginalized. He's upset about all these rich people coming to LA, raising the rent, taking the culture of the working class away from them and kind of sending it back to us after they've basically butchered it. I'm going to read just a quick excerpt from the first book, which has the cover of the Highland Theater where I grew up in Highland Park on it. Miguel parked in a rooftop complex off Maple and 6th in downtown. Taking a deep breath, he took a look around. The streets were crowded with people walking around the fringe area of downtown LA, between the downtrodden, steadily being colonized Skid Row and the already done and gentrified Pershing Square-bound side. Los Angeles Street seemed to divide the two. The contrast was night and day. Working class on one side for the most part, and walking appetites on the other. Just by simply crossing the street, your relative income bracket could be decimated or upgraded. Skid Row bound side would get you botanica herbs, a pair of suede shoes, a strawberry licuado, a new stereo and some pupusas for less than $80. The Pershing Square bound side would probably run you about $30 just for parking and a cup of some amateur roaster's pretentious coffee. This is probably an exaggeration, but the general idea is this. An invisible class wall could drop on you in almost any fucking corner of Los Angeles these days. Funny thing though, if you ask the average shiftless artist walking down Broadway what they thought of the matter, they'd go into some bullshit monologue about how excited they were about the all-new, all-inclusive Los Angeles. They'd shamelessly babble about how great it is that the class barriers have fallen and we can all just integrate and enjoy together. Now, I could be wrong, but I don't think Birch on Hill Street, or Fate and Fowler on 9th Street, or Prue and Popper on Spring Street, or any other of these pretentious downtown shitholes are charging on a fucking sliding scale so everybody in Los Angeles can enjoy the perks of LA's new phantom all-inclusiveness. No, don't think so. Most long-time, low-income LA residents can't afford to spend any more than $10 to $15 per person on dinner these days. That said, these places are running way past that kind of money for just hors d'oeuvres and one lousy, handcrafted cocktail. Apparently, mixed drinks used to be made by robots before these places came up with that term. I have no idea. And the fun didn't stop there. You'd think the biggest laugh of being mentally forced to swallow extremely moronic fantasy ideas of social progress would stop with the fake all-inclusiveness, but no. The most cherishable stupidity came in the form of the type of food they served at these shitholes. I know I'm not getting very creative here, describing them as shitholes twice already. But no other descriptive does justice, in my opinion. Nothing else so thoroughly makes it clear that a place that does silly shit like market its dining area as environmentally interactive art or sells gourmet hot dogs at steakhouse prices is some scummy ass, insulting to the intellect, sideshow nonsense. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nathan. All right. Our next poet is Antonieta Villamil. Please welcome Antonieta.
Gracias. Yo tengo dos poemas. Uno reciente, escrito en inglés, que para mí es like, woohoo, I wrote a poem in English, fuck. And one in español I wrote in 2001. From my book, El Imperio por un poema, paraphrasing William Shakespeare. El Imperio por un poema. Lo que voy a cantar es bullarengue, una forma afrocolombian. Pájaro de vida, pájaro de agua, somos de memoria, somos de futuro, pájaro agorero, pájaro de luz, somos una idea que no morirá. Mujercita de tercer mundo, que lo digan. Digan que soy una malinche andariega porque me fui al norte con todo mi desencanto, mi osadía y mi hambre de mujercita de tercer mundo. Que lo digan, no me importa. Pero digan que me fui a propósito con toda mi irreverencia y mi rabia para construirle el tiempo al poema. Digan que traigo en mi mirada el ojo del huracán y bajo las uñas la tierra que no pude excavar para mis muertos, que traigo en el filo hambriento de mi lengua un sí se puede en rojo grito hasta la victoria en el centro del corazón, y que este ejército de trabajadores desposeídos que me acompaña transforma el imperio con el poder del número, que somos muchos y no los vamos a matar porque ellos son parte de nosotros. Los inoculamos con nuestra presencia, nos hacemos innumerables, encantadores de serpientes, necesarios parásitos de parásitos que le prestamos el cuerpo al imperio como ellos al florido basurero para hacerle el amor a la vida. que aquí estoy, haciéndome la gringa con todo mi desgano, viviendo de renta en el monstruo que día a día inoculo mi veneno, construyo el tiempo al gran poema de la caída, por la memoria de mis muertos, de mis desaparecidas, mujeres de tercer mundo, que inmigrantes y llenas de hambre, dejamos la sed colgada en los desiertos de Texas, California, Nuevo México y Arizona, que por su ultraje soy de la mosca, la larva de mujercita tercermundista en la barriga del gordo imperio, que aquí estoy, devolviéndole su narcoparamilitar decadencia. Sí, que lo sepan, soy el virus socavando su columna de friolento ice. Y cuando llegue el esperado día, entregaré todo este imperio usurero por solo un poema. Pájaro de vida, pájaro de día, aunque nos maten, no nos callarán. Pájaro presente con la madre tierra, dame tu poder de evolución. And the one I wrote in English in a few years later, that was 2011. Woman of Andar on Fire. Caminante, no hay camino, se hace camino al andar, de Antonio Machado, es como un epígrafe. Walker, there is no road, it's made road as you walk. Caminante, no hay camino, se hace camino al andar. Caminante, no hay camino, se hace camino al andar. You will find her riding the dream that gallops wide awake, not a witch, but rites of magic, not an angel, she flies within lines to eyes that shade her wings, entrance to the mirror of a seer, endures pain, expects no one to love her, loves, and that is enough. She is not an unrelenting fountain of life or wars. Despite the mutilations of loving, her eyes ancient as snakes glance on wings of eagle, nest the iris of night. This woman, a sojourn through untamed earth, knowing she is not this body blood vessel, emptying and filling with daybreak, holding her head against extinction, dripping nerve over this fever page. She breathes this earth soil all the way to its marrow. She howls to keep a voice, a sword, wounding silence, hovering over one more millennium. She is the patience of womb. The road she walks bears a sage mix of tierra and tangerine. You will find her in what shines maize in noble quinoa, wheat road made from walking on fire, marks her place, strength in pen strokes of incandescence in the shape of a woman.
Antonieta, that was awesome. Thank you. Thank you for being here. All right. I want to share two poems with you all. It's also going to be in Spanish. One of them is kind of a love letter on rock en español, just listening to a lot of that. So it's called Mi voz entre tanto rock and roll. Tanto ruido en mi idioma, como golpe de estado, como guerrillero en trincheras, como estudiante en las protestas. Tanta violencia en mi idioma, como genocidio, como la lengua de Dios, como la muerte de mis hermanos. Tanto desastre en mi idioma que la ciudad es después de un temblor, como el doble sentido en un verso, como una nota de más en el ensayo. Tanto dolor en mi idioma que nos siguen pegando abajo, que nos muerden los labios, que me apachurra el corazón y sangro tinta, formo un charco de garabatos y la canción entra a un puente con choques de símbolos y solos de guitarra. Tanto movimiento en mi tierra, como en el 85, como el nervio del volcán, como la llegada de los barcos. Tanta sabiduría enterrada bajo las iglesias. En los pozos de fuego, la serpiente desciende, termina la canción y sus cascabeles se estremecen. Thank you. And one last piece, this one's just called Green, Verde, and it's just a rap on the color and everything that that inspires, yeah. Las hojas que tu familia heredaron, verde, es la lucha de tus padres, tu propia sangre a duelo y tu corazón veloz al momento que entran desconocidos por el hueco abierto. Entre el vidrio y el metal del vehículo se llevan todo lo verde, en tu estado mental y los defensores que revisan tu caso. Tus restos y tus quejas están en buenas manos. Los mejores abogados han hecho, deshecho, cobrado, firmado y tú ni en cuenta. Verde la mota cotidiana y la paz después de la guerra. El color absoluto de la madre tierra. De tu memoria, la hierba, tu casa. Nubla la calle y desaparecen. Valles, eras, rejas, dientes, ecos, la sombra gigante de la Santa Muerte. En el buró parada junto a mi padre con piedras y cristal. Es el mundo y mi fortuna. Cuando era niño, papá manejaba un suro en una ciudad verde, antes de cruzar la frontera en una cajuela verde, escondido de la migra de uniforme con colores de mi bandera, esperanza, unidad y sangre. Como favor a Doña Muerte, mi papá dejó el cigarro. Su segundo hijo, cenicero de profesión, se casó con una chava de ojos verdes, y su mundo gira al revés. Quiero manejar sobre la banda de tiempo, rumbo a Tenochtitlan, antes de la conquista, cuando todo era verde, y quiero atropellar a Cortés, recitarle un pedocanto, porque no merece buena poesía. Mi carro verde hoy circula, y mañana también. Agárrense bien donde puedan. Thank you. All right. So, thank you all for being out here with us. We're going to hear from some great readers, but we're going to continue the open mic with three more folks. If anybody wants to jump in, we have about 1 or 2 more slots. So speak now or forever hold your peace. But next up we have Paisley. So welcome.
Cool lighting. Hello, everybody. My name is Paisley. Thank you. Stoked to be here. Let's give another round for everybody who's gone so far. That was beautiful poetry that I've heard. I'm going to play a song. It's from an album I released earlier this year called Apocalypse Sounds, about revolution and apocalypse being ongoing and happening right now, and how I feel about it. I'm here today with, there's my dog running away. I'm here. Bye, Lovey. She usually comes here. Maybe she thought the voice through her. But I'm with Etna Street Solidarity and RVTV, so you can come hang out with us out. Oh, thank you. Outside after. Oh, hey, baby. Etna Street Solidarity. We organize directly with folks living on Etna Street in Van Nuys. And last week, our community was displaced and decimated by sanitation and police, and the mayor as part of her Inside Safe program. So we can talk more about that again if you're interested. But we are fundraising and looking for some supplies. We have like a list of that outside. RV TV is an independent media show that I run out of my RV, where I try to bring just the word on the street, what's happening, you know, from my perspective as a guy who lives in his RV. So anyway, here's a song from the album, and it's called Hey You, and it's dedicated to the 6 unhoused people who die every day on the streets of Los Angeles, and all the rest of us who are still living and remembering and celebrating their lives and fighting for a liberated world in their honor, and for all of us. So, hey, you walking down the street, I've been wondering about the things that you've seen. Dirty people with their beautiful dreams of being clean. Hey, you with the scars on your skin, I can see beyond the prison you're in. How the way the world beholds you don't fit with how you're living. Maybe I won't be seeing you for a long time. Hey, you know the chance you keep to walk on air and wear the stars on your feet hangs in the balance of the planets you need and reality. Maybe I'll be seeing you, or maybe not. I pretend I'm invincible, but you're all that I've got. It's not asking a lot to want more in the end. You'll find you're much better off getting used to the view from the edge. Who's to say you're lucky? Who's to say you're cursed? Who's to say you're sorry when you're the one that gets hurt? It's funny how it all shakes out to be better. Looking back, we desire what we lack more than what we deserve. Tell me, what do you think you deserve? Tell me, what do you think you deserve? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much. And you can find the album everywhere except for Amazon Music, and it's like, I think it's free on YouTube. And you can follow me on RV TV Show on Instagram and Edna Street Solidarity on Instagram.
All right. To continue with Edna Street Solidarity, we have Carla with us.
All right. That was beautiful, Paisley. So I'm going to read 2 selections from Street Views, which is a mutual aid newspaper that was put together in collaboration with UCLA students, unhoused communities throughout Los Angeles, and housing justice organizers all across the state of California. So it's free. Everyone should pick up a copy, and you can learn more about the fight against 4118. Has anybody heard of it? Who can tell me what 4118 is? Go for it. It's a banishment law that bans sitting, lying, sleeping from public sidewalks in Los Angeles. Every city in this country it's absolutely illegal. It's been deemed unconstitutional, and yet the city of LA does not know how to quit, and will never stop taking aggressive action against poor people, against low-income people. So this is an invitation to be part of that fight. I'm going to read a few pieces. One in history from Justiceville. This was originally written by Andrew Boland, and this was a struggle in the 80s for Justiceville, a community's fight for dignity and survival. In March 1985, 63 individuals experiencing houselessness united to challenge the unbearable living conditions in overcrowded Los Angeles County shelters. Facing apathy among public agencies and realizing that their best chance of survival was to help themselves, they formed the remarkable community which they named Justiceville in the heart of Skid Row. Under the visionary leadership of Ted Hayes, Justiceville became a beacon of hope and a testament to the power of community. Hayes and his founding comrades constructed a self-sustaining village on a vacant plot of land they agreed to rent for $1 per month. It sought to provide not just physical shelter, but also care and a pathway to integrate residents into society. Justiceville provided sanitation facilities, including toilets and showers, employment opportunities, and a community safety program. Moving into Justiceville required community buy-in. Residents possessed a collective determination to improve their lives, take care of their neighbors, and create a revolutionary and sustainable model for building power among unhoused people. Justiceville nurtured a renewed sense of hope and belonging among its residents. Roger Farr of the Skid Row Mental Health Program recognized these accomplishments, noting that Justiceville gave people hope that society hasn't abandoned them. This sense of unity engendered feelings of safety and belonging, forging a surrogate family through the community's embrace. Under pressure from city authorities, citing sanitation and safety violations, the owner of the site eventually forced Justiceville residents to abandon the village. LAPD cleared the community and destroyed their facilities and infrastructure. Within a day, a thriving community became little more than a pile of dust and debris. Justiceville's residents were sent back to the streets. Justiceville stands as a testament to the strength and resilience of collective care. People fueled by compassion and determination brought about profound change. May the legacy of Justiceville continue to inspire us in approaching houselessness with empathy and dignity, lighting the path towards a more compassionate future for all. So these are just one of the stories of organizing that many of us have never been taught, that houseless people have been doing for decades. I just wanted to share another little piece about Etnapalooza. We organize with Etna Street Solidarity, which is just it's an encampment community that's been there for over 20 years, just off the Van Nuys Orange Line station in the San Fernando Valley, where I'm born and raised. Shout out if you're born and raised in LA or a kid of immigrants here. It is every day is a fight and struggle to stay. So on a hot spring morning in late April, dozens of community members gathered on Etna Street in Van Nuys to celebrate art, culture, and community. The second annual Etnapalooza Street Festival celebrated resistance on Etna Street. The day-long event reclaimed public space and brought together community members, artists, mutual aid organizations, musicians, builders, makers, students, and friends. Etnapalooza is an event rooted in love and abolition, and we invite you to join us for a joyful celebration for those who are fighting for the right to remain, the right to housing, and the right to stay. Etnapalooza centered art with simultaneous mural painting, candle collaging, performances, and crafts. As people listened to poetry by Lupita and calls to action from organizers like LaDonna, attendees sipped ice-cold waters and sodas and enjoyed tacos from Myra from Community Power Collective. The chefs hand-pressed the masa into fresh corn tortillas on site. Folks got haircuts and new clothes. Everything was free. There were resources and community organizations. People leaving the Orange Line, passing by on the street, traveling from across the city came together to eat, dance, laugh, and build together. In addition to the resources pulled together by communities across LA, Etnapalooza also asked attendees to imagine a world where this community could be permanent. Organizers and community members spent the day imagining a world beyond the current violence, the policies of banishment and displacement, and the constant state created and perpetuated scarcity, the world that we currently live in. Etna is a long-standing encampment of tents and hand-built structures on Etna Street and Van Nuys Boulevard, often known as the Skid Row of the Valley. Etna Street has been a site of resistance for decades, but the city's imposition of a 4118 zone has brought renewed attention to the importance of strong and organized communities. A collaborative of current and former Etna residents, UCLA students, and housing justice organizers hosted multiple activities as part of a larger organizing effort. One group, in collaboration with radical tiny house builder Elvis Summers, led a build that repurposed pallets to create movable platforms. Instructions on how to build this yourself is on page 11 of Street Views. Another group asked participants to rewrite the 4118 law by marking up a giant printed version of the ordinance. A third group asked Etna residents to reflect and write down what a hope for a future Etna could be. Finally, the group supporting the creation and publication of this newspaper had an Etna Narratives booth where attendees could stop by and share their story, a vision for this newspaper, or helpful tips for others who are currently living on the streets. Many of the pieces including in this edition of Street Views came from the ideas or conversations at Etnapalooza. Dwight, a community advocate, expressed, "I think Etnapalooza was a building block event that gave life to our group project and to this newspaper as a whole." Group facilitators had an open conversation with community members who expressed their feelings around topics ranging from life experiences to how wasteful current housing programs are that don't do anything to house people. The groups captured these moments through a recording device and have included quotes below. When I think about an encampment, what's happening at Etna, it is a community. I do see it as a way of life. A lot of us are on survival. A lot of us operate out of fear. When you first walk into an encampment, you might be afraid, but once you really tap into community, you see people operate out of love. You see that people are unhoused, that might not have a lot of monetary means, but are cooking for each other, they're sharing, they're taking care. Even that alone is a radical thought, right? Just like community coming together and sharing food. You don't see that everywhere. Resistance in the valley. In spite of the city's policies of forced displacement, Etna continues to be a small place of safety on the streets. Nothing showed this more than Etnapalooza. Everyone was welcomed with open arms, warm food, cold drinks, vibrant art, and a chance to continue to build the world that we wish to see. Thank you. I think Michael, who's next, is on the front page. You can support his art, which is outside. Feel free to ask him questions. He came from Lancaster, so we want to just give him a big old shout out for being here and for sharing your work and your stories.
All right. All right, we just have two more readers. Michael Johnson. Yeah, welcome up.
I'll tell you the truth, I was coerced into doing this, so I want you to know that, right? Yeah. No, really, I'm just going to read a piece. It's a story that I read for this newspaper concerning having an ID. It was called Finally in ID. What is the value in having an identification card? Having lived in state of California for over 20 and never possessing a California ID, the importance of having one never brought is back on me. But circumstances have made them acknowledge that there is a value in having one, because I never truly realized the value of having an ID. I did not try to get one, nor did I really want one. Dealing with the basic things in life, like getting human services benefits from the Department of Social Services, being able to travel and going into business establishment, made me see the necessity of having a physical California ID. Of course, there is the matter of being identified by the police in case of being stopped by one for whatever reasons. Then there is the need to be known in case you have to go to the hospital for emergency, and a whole host of other things where an identification card is required. Finally, having a real corporate ID hit home for me. The reality of seeing how people have responded to me in positive ways tells me that it does matter to have an ID, if for no other reason than being able to be identified.
Thank you so much, Michael. And to close us out, we have Chris Vanoy. You want to share a piece? Please welcome Chris.
Let's call it page 17. Life's not easy in the streets. I see them every day, pushing shopping carts that clink clank over cracks in the sidewalk. City stalkers, nomads of the 21st century. There's One Tooth Sue. She talks to herself. Remembers when she was prom queen. See there? How she turns away from her reflection in that plate glass window? She's wondering who the old, wrinkled woman is. Did you hear her? Not me, not me, not me. And there's Mark the Shark throwing cards on the pavement. Come on, bro, just watch these cards. Slipping and sliding. I know that you win this time. 2 down, 1 up. Which one? Which one? Only one, bug. There, dude, I'm showing this guy around town. Bald Betty over there. She wraps remnants of old blankets around her head. Sings old church hymns, too, when she can remember the words. Cancer treatment took what little savings she had left after the house was sold. And there's Three-Finger Joe tipping that bottle of Ripple skyward. Squeezes his eyes shut against the sun. Breathing lightly today. He's trying to hide the pain of 2 busted ribs. Those punks, they wouldn't have messed with him 10 years ago. I kicked both their asses good. See those 2 missing fingers on his right hand? That's what ended his boxing career. Broke his spirit. Spit him out on these streets of piss and booze. And there's Wanda, waiting over by the shelter door with her 2 dirty-faced kids. She's trying to hide her fear and humiliation and the swelling on the side of her face, swearing silently to herself, this is going to be the last time he's ever going to hit her. The second time this month. What can the cops do? She won't press charges. I see them all the time, every day, and I know most of them. All the regulars anyway. They're just ordinary people, just trying to get by on what's they got. Scraping like the rest of us. Where most of them have to scrape a little harder. Dig a little deeper down their soul just to survive these days. Life's not easy here on the streets. Hell, life ain't easy anywhere nowadays. Oh, is someone waiting in an alley around the corner where the street lamps don't shine, waiting just to bash your head in with a lead pipe. And for what? For what? These people ain't got nothing, man, to clothes on their backs. Buddy says he can see their spirits go. Oh, his howls just like an old hound dog. Oh! Heard him howling a while ago. Over that way means he's seen someone dead. Be sure when old buddy howls that someone's done gone to meet his maker. Well, it's about the time to get in line for the mission. It's good food once you get past the preaching. You want to come? All right. Well, maybe I'll see you around. Here's some more stories about people who live down here on the streets where only pennies shine in the hot sun. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you for closing us out. And round of applause for all our readers today tonight. Thank you. Yeah, Natasha? All right, so now on to our star authors of the afternoon. Do want to give a brief land acknowledgement. We are on Tongva, Taven territory, Chumash territory, in this settlement now that we know as Venice. Beyond Baroque is an organization that is committed to uplifting indigenous communities and artists. We recognize the communities are still with us. This is the original City Hall building, about 110 years old. And since the late 70s, it's been taken over by artists and writers up to this day. It's been 55 years and still going strong. So it's thanks to the community, thanks to artists that make this space what it is today. If you just came in, just know that there's going to be there's going to be a punk band after the readings playing, but also we have a few organizations that joined us today for this event, anywhere from the LA Public Defender's Office to Etna Street Solidarity in the San Fernando Valley, All Power, Free Clinic, and ROC, or ROC, LA, who work with restaurant. It stands for Restaurant Opportunity Center, who work with the food industry workers. So feel free to check out any of those tables, and Knock LA as well, independent journalism, and you can support. But tonight, we're here, today actually, we're here also because Juanita Mans, who's a great author and a friend now that I've come to know working here at Beyond Baroque, that we connected from Venice and the Valley to the Inland Empire, so all throughout Southern California. So thank you for curating this great lineup of authors who are all punk, anti-establishment, rebels in their own merit. So I will let Juanita tell you more about them, but just so that you know a little bit about Juanita Mans, she is a USC law-educated lawyer, writer, and podcaster, and has been a deputy public defender in Riverside for 15 years and specializes in representing mentally incompetent clients. Her memoir, Tales of an Inland Empire Girl, about her chaotic, i.e. punk rock childhood and a high school dropout year, won bronze at the 2023 Latino Book 2 Movie Awards. Her intersection with punk rock won gold at the 2022 International Latino Book Awards for Best First Book Nonfiction. She is a Macondista and has presented at the UCR Writers Week, CSUSB, the UCR Punk Conference, AWP, and Beyond Baroque. She produced the ASA 2020 Freedom Course on combating mass incarceration and is in the low-res residency MFA program at the University of New Orleans. On her video podcast, Life of Gem, she does live interviews with writers. You can find her on her author website, juanitamans.com. Please welcome Juanita Mans.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jam, Juanita Estela Mance. Thank you, Ivan. He's been such a supporter of my work. I'd like to thank Beyond Baroque. I'd like to thank all the social justice organizations that made it out. I've had this idea in my head of something like this for so many years, and hopefully next year we'll be able to do it in the Inland Empire. But I just want to thank all the readers who are reading today, and all my friends for being here, and for anyone that showed up, and for all the open mic readers. It was beautiful. Okay, I have two books. This is Tales of an Inland Empire Girl. This book took me 15 years. I started when my dad died, and I moved back home and found myself. But I'm not going to read from that one because I got to read from the social justice one. I wrote this right after George Floyd was murdered by the police. Public defenders around the nation. We had a movement. We all started marching. We all started advocating more for our clients. And it taught me that I was a little bit desensitized as a public defender. And so it's called Portrait of a Deputy Public Defender, or How I Became a Punk Rock Lawyer. The title is based on James Joyce's Portrait of the Artist. So I'm going to read a short poem and then a short essay that I've given you the Reader's Digest version. I cut some pieces out. So this first poem is called Static. It's based on a Joy Division song. I was in a poetry workshop with Stephanie Barbie Hammer during COVID online, and I kept on listening to that Joy Division song. It just called Transmission, and so this is what I came up with. It's called Static. Can you hear me screaming in my head, let my people go, let me go, saying, let us go. Release everyone from this system that hurts us all. As a deputy public defender, I used to think I could work within it, but now I see it's broken. Can you hear me screaming in your ear? Listen to me, please. Listen, listen. Let me do what I do, then let me go from this misery of banging my head. My ears are ringing from the beat of cuffs on bars of cells across America. Are you there? Can you hear me? Screaming your name, it all still remains. Excuse me, excuse you, forgive me, forgive us all. We know not what we do, or maybe we do. Okay, so thank you. This book is a hybrid book of essays, poetry, and memoir pieces, and it's about how I dropped out of high school and how that is my magic wand as a public defender. And I love my clients. I have to say that. People say that us public defenders do the work for the money, and you would never do this work for the money. There's not enough money in it. But I do well now, but it took many years. But I do it because I really see myself in my clients. I was a juvenile delinquent, high school dropout that used to steal her dad's car. So how punk rock and public defense align. In high school, I was obsessed with Sid Vicious. His poster was tacked up on my wall, and I'd blow him a kiss every morning. My best friend Tracy and I would watch Sid and Nancy obsessively. The couple seemed so tragic, like Romeo and Juliet. I'll bet a punk rock version. Some nights, I would fall asleep and dream of living back in 1970s UK, which didn't seem so far away in the 80s when I grew up. Sid's story fascinated my teenage self. He grew up poor. He taught himself to play bass. He was a stylish clothes horse that didn't give a shit about anything. But as an adult looking back, I must acknowledge that his true story is the opposite of romantic. It's sad, hopeless. His story, along with Nancy Spoogen's, was more about addiction, mental health, and ended up in murder, suicide, and overdosing. Looking back, what I felt inspired, though, was about Sid's I don't give a fuck attitude. There is something in the freedom of punk, the anarchy, and the rejection of strict social systems that drew me in, along with the fashion, which I was always fascinated by. As a young girl, I loved me a guy with a mohawk, and I can still see myself in my mind's eye as a kid, all gussied up in my ripped up tights, sold in the hard and utilitarian nature of combat boots, or the Frankenstein thick aesthetic of creepers. I still have a pair of creepers. As a teenager, I would pair boxers over thermals and a punk tee with a thrift store oversized vest and blazer. Kids in my high school in Ontario, California would ask me, why don't you listen to Power 106? That was the Latinx dance music station. I would look at them and think, why are you trying to put me in a box? But back then in the 80s, I did not know about Alice Bagg, who broke the gender and racial ceilings of punk. I would find out about her history later as an adult, and recently I devoured her memoir, Violence Girl, which chronicles her childhood and rise in the LA punk scene. What is punk for me? Punk means no rules, the breaking of rules, rebellion, no boundaries, inclusivity, at least it started out that way, and a blue-collar fuck the man ethos. Punk for me started like bands like the New York Dolls, people like Patti Smith, who was more than a poet than a punker really, but she was my heroine in high school. I devoured her album Horses, and later I would learn that she was in the New York punk scene from the very beginning and merged poetry and music in a new and novel way. And of course, there would be no punk without the incomparable chameleon and my hero, David Bowie. One of my favorite bands was and is the LA punk band X. There's something about the chaos of the punk and cowboy harmonies of John Doe and Exene Cervenka that has always touched me. And of course, the Sex Pistols sparked something in my creative brain and let something loose. There were other bands, the Ramones, another starter band, but then Generation X, the Buzzcocks, the Replacements, And then post-punk bands like Bauhaus, Joy Division, Susie, The Cure, the Pixies, and the Smiths. As a teenager in the 80s in the Inland Empire, the same kids who loved punk loved bands like Bauhaus, Joy Division, and Love and Rockets. But there was a political side to punk that drew me in, even as a teenager who was struggling to find herself and her voice. In high school and college, I would see people in my neighborhood pulled over and harassed, and I knew the police were not a benevolent force. The Clash speaks to this in their cover of the Munyard Jr. song, Police and Thieves. Police and thieves in the streets scaring the nation with their guns and ammunition. That song in retrospect can be seen as a prophecy about America's turn towards police militarization. And likewise, Johnny Cash, who influenced bands like Social Distortion, he sang at Folsom Prison, and he wrote songs and sang songs that spoke to an unjust and harsh criminal system. From a young age, I always had an innate sense of justice and a strong empathy for the underdog. I would look at my mom toiling away, waitressing by day, and spending her nights on the graveyard shift at Circle K and think, that's not fair. My mom was wicked smart. She could read a book in a day, yet she was constrained by time and circumstance, having left school as a teenager when her mom died. My mom got her GED in her 30s when I got mine. My dad was similarly constrained by his birthplace in post-Depression Great Falls, Montana, having spent time in an orphanage. He grew up so poor that the sight of rice would make him gag. Yet still, my dad taught me to dream. Even though he was a furniture mover that broke him physically, he accomplished his biggest dream of owning a bar, which is so punk rock, come on. His tavern called the Big O, it only lasted a few years. Why? Because a drinker owning a bar is a disaster waiting to happen. But it was all his. He put Joan Jett and the Go-Go's on the jukebox for us. And as kids, we would help him clean the bar and dance. Dad had his dream, and like I said, a few years later, the bar was gone, as well as our house and any financial stability my family had. A blue-collar aesthetic is at the heart of this. As the Chicana writer and activist Cherie Moraga has said much more eloquently than I ever could, there is a language to the blue-collar aesthetic. In my memoir and childhood stories about growing up blue-collar, I write in that language. Punks sing in that language. Public defenders fight in that language. This criminal system you see is very much about class and economics. Starting with selective enforcement, then bail, then representation, then to gang enhancements, and let's not even talk about the death penalty. In most ways, the criminal system we have created in this country is anti-lower class, which creates a subclass below lower class, below working class, which I call the incarcerated class. People who are in fact incarcerated due to lack of economic privilege pre-trial. They haven't been convicted of anything yet. People who would otherwise be free to fight their case on the outside, except for the fact that they are poor. In my work, I advocate for clients with no means. Every single one of my clients is poor, what the system calls indigent. The vast majority are in custody. In my opinion, it's like this because they are the clients people want to throw away and punish and at best forget. Out of sight, out of mind. But you see, public defense is the opposite of where I was after graduation from USC Law School. If public defense is McDonald's, corporate law is Ruth Chris Steakhouse. The only thing is I hated big firm life. It was boring. It was tedious. There was a hierarchy. Every motion had to be run up a poll of partners. There was no autonomy. I was a suit, a sellout. When I was an associate at the largest firm in Houston, Texas, I didn't listen to music much. I certainly never did my eyeliner the way I do or wear my combat boots. I told no one I dropped out of high school. No one knew my dad was a truck driver and my mom was a waitress. I denied myself and my creative soul, and I became Eliza Doolittle. But where I am now is different. Public defense is the antithesis of corporate law. It is fighting for your clients in a system that is stacked against them. At times, there's too much autonomy and not enough help or resources. But if you are a good lawyer, you can make it work. If you love the underdog and you love a comeback story, you will find your passion. For me, when I went there, I felt like I was home. I found my purpose. I still deal with stereotypes about what a lawyer should look like. Early in my public defense career, I walked into a trial courtroom and was told by a deputy that court was closed and only attorneys were allowed in. I explained I was an attorney. I walked right inside. But my clients are a different story. They see themselves in me and my brown skin. One day, a colleague said, "Hey, Juanita, a guy in the custody, he's saying he's your cousin." I looked over, and in fact, he was. It was Milky Eye. And it was my cousin, and we got him out. Despite the public perception of the public defense bar, I know firsthand that all the coolest and hardest working lawyers are deputy public defenders. We don't do the job for the gold stars or a big paycheck. We do the job because we believe in justice. We believe in those in our community that no one else cares about. We do the job because we want to fight the man and end a cruel system of injustice. We fight for the most voiceless and the most oppressed. We go toe-to-toe with others in a system that is rigged. As a holdover from slavery and Jim Crow, the goal of the current carceral system is to incarcerate. The seminal book on this issue is The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. But even more horrific, think about this. The system is at its core racist and discriminates against the poor. As Professor Angela Davis, who I recently met at Cal State San Bernardino, and I cried my eyes out, in her book, Are Prisons Obsolete?, she wrote, thus, begin quote, "If we're willing to take seriously the consequences of a racist and class-based system, we will reach the conclusion that enormous numbers of people are in prison simply because they are, for example, Black, Chicano, Vietnamese, Native American, or poor, regardless of their ethnic background. They are sent to prison not so much because of the crimes they may have indeed committed, but because their communities have been criminalized." End quote. The system is stacked against people of color. It's stacked against the poor with draconian laws and sentencing, unfair and discriminatory bail policies, and lack of treatment opportunities. It makes no sense. Salvation, not incarceration, should be our goal. But instead, the goal is punishment and debilitation. At its core, it must be said, the criminal system is inhumane, unjust, and unfair. And that's why it takes this punk rock rebel to fight against this system every day in her metaphorical combat boots, fist in the air. Thank you. So it's my deep joy here to thank all our readers, and I'm here to introduce someone who I've recently met in person, but I've known over work. She's just amazing. Margaret Alicia Garcia is the author of the short story collection, Graft, from Tolson Books, the poetry chapbook, Burn Scars, and the poetry collection, The Daughterland, poems by El Martillo Press. It's out there, go get it, it's amazing. She's the co-editor of the forthcoming Red Flag Warning, Northern Californians Living with Fire anthology by Heyday Books. She's currently working on a second poetry collection and a historical speculative novel. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. So I'm going to read a couple of new poems and a few from the Daughterland. And thank you so much for that intro. A little change. We pulled it from Heyday Books. It's probably going to be on AK Press, which is more of a good thing for us. Like, go with the anarchist press when you can. Okay. I wrote this book. I started this during COVID. My daughter and I had a really hard time through that. She was always my more social child, and she was having a bit of an identity crisis. And if I could set up these poems, I'd say I recently moved back here after 20 years in the Sierras. And And her dad and I moved to the Sierras to be around my mom. And we were living in a small town that burned down. But prior to that, we were one of the few Mexican-American families in the town. And that plays heavily into my daughter's dealing with everything. As you can imagine, raising children in a rural town, it's bucolic, gorgeous, and then Trump gets elected and everyone is free to say whatever they want to say. So I think my punk rockness comes with trying to raise children to say, don't give a shit what other people are trying to throw at you. So here's some poems from that. After the fight. Why can't I just be white? Sometimes I just wish I was white. Her right cheek still bleeds as she jumps into the passenger seat after the jump in the hallway after sixth period. Re-instruct our children to never hit back. Self-defense is not your defense when you're brown. I know. Why, like I already know who did it. A failing girl who's been her friend, who said she answers too many of the teacher's questions correctly, and she didn't want to hear her straight A Mexican voice anymore. Last week I told her it's best not to look the crazy or the lazy in the eyes. Boy in fourth period asks, why haven't you been deported yet? Everyone laughs, and another teacher says another nothing. She cries in the passenger seat below the sight line. If I was white, everything I do or say could just be ignored. Later, the principal will assure me my daughter did nothing wrong, and they will not suspend her for being on the wrong side of a fist. Later still, the principal will insist it had nothing to do with ethnicity, nothing to do with race. And here's another one from the book. This is called Inventory of the Borders of Daughterland. You asked who we were when they wheeled you away. We are from a land of no apologies, of no forgiveness, of something done when you are young held against you. We are from a land of set bedtimes and daily chores and nothing in the sink, nothing on the floor, no one at the door. We are Saturday morning loud Mexican music on exquisite stereos and stucco houses and dance and clean and bleach and bleach and clean and dance and dance. We are a family of Latinas who label each other too white when we succeed, brown when things go down, our words imprinted on both our light and dark skins. We are brown girls, but not that kind of brown. We are white girls, but not that kind of white. And we are with and without Spanish, with pretty words sent to conquer us. We are from pristine vehicles and manicured lawns because someone at a gas station called our parents dirty on their way home from work in 1957. We are pretty smart we are degrees by degree. We are rosaries and candles. We are from you don't retire, you work until you die. We are generosity that doesn't call attention to itself, and we are cash only, don't use credit. Happiness is for later when you can afford it. We are from don't back down. We're from having the last word, even if that last word has to go unspoken. We are dark lipstick and roses, blue robes and gold stars, sinners and saints, Mary and Tonatzin, cemetery playgrounds, hoops and heels, gold crosses to bear, gringa, gavacha, pocha, California, home. Okay, and I just have a couple, two more.
Tell people to come on in.
Yeah, come on in. If you want, come on in. Good. All right. It's all good. So This poem is dedicated to my mother, and if you're a writer and you have a mom, they probably, especially if you have a Mexican mom, they think absolutely everything you write is about them, even when it's not. And my mom always like tells people who don't know her, like, I'm like the grandma from Coco, and we're like, that is not a compliment. So anyway, this goes out to my mother, who's out in Missouri right now. It's called Air Conditioning. I cannot sleep in the summer heat of her house, where a button on the wall beneath a portrait of Our Lady of Guadalupe would bring such relief. Don't you dare touch it, my mother says. Air conditioning is for the rich and the weak. In her house, I attempt to sleep with ice packs and damp rags and sweat the way women my age turn and toss off even a threadbare sheet. I offer to pay these mythic electric bills our family has never seen. My mother, she's disappointed in me, jaw clenched. I daydream of sleep in cool hotel rooms by the ocean with waves rocking me to sleep. My mother says her mixed children need too much comfort. She points to Our Lady of Guadalupe on the wall and commands me to endure, as if climate control was an unattainable luxury, like the privilege of a father's skin. Thank you very much for that. And yeah, you don't have to clap. So I'm working on a couple of new collections of things, and I just wrote this poem, which is now apparently the favorite poem of the other Margaret Garcia, the painter. She and I are buddies because we always knew about each other, but didn't know how to get a hold of each other. And then her husband and a good friend of mine got us to start hanging out, and now we're buddies. So this goes out to her, and she's probably about the most feisty person I know. This is called Leave Frida the Fuck Alone. She never wanted to come back. Yet you pulled her into pillows and purses and magnets and mouse pads and shawls and dolls and suitcases, statement rings, telephones and talisman things. She was a communist, an atheist, and you are such a church bazaar. Sell her face on totes and tees and keepsake box and knee-high socks, celebrating our culture in glittered bottle-capped earrings, littering art history with apron aphorisms and glue gun gifts. She's now sanitized, saint candle, cute baby book Frida. You soft-focused Frida, smooth out her frame. Your Frida is well-rounded, no edges, and does not smell like cigarettes and missed meals and rotted teeth from living off candy treats and the swig of bedside whiskey and unswept floors where her monkeys and the peacocks go. Look, if Frida were alive today, she would fuck your husband. And the girl you wanted in college that didn't want you. Because that's exactly what the real Frida would do. And I would laugh and laugh as you head tilt. Miss Kahlo, can I have your autograph? Go ahead. You try and tell her she and Diego just needed better boundaries, couples therapies, and other assorted effronteries. You've made her this doe-eyed, pale, left the eyebrows but erased the mustache. She painted pain and sorrow and not your vibrant little floral tomorrows. She is blood-dipped arrows and corsets and columns, and yet you swaddle her in jungle print patterns and parrots parroting craft show hobbies. Is this what the water was supposed to bring her? Frida's dress hangs here in our polluted Gringolandia air. Those tethered truths still float above her in the ether of the Ford Hospital, and your constant little snips are all just beneath her. Thank you.
Oh, it's fucking epic. Thank you. I have no words. So good. So good. Next up is one of the most amazing persons. Richard T. Rodriguez is a professor of English and Media and Cultural Studies, and Susie, at the University of California in Riverside. He is the author of Next of Kin, The Family in Chicana Cultural Politics, 2009, and most recently, his magnum opus, A Kiss Across the Ocean, Transatlantic Intimacies of British Post-Punk and U.S. Latinidad, 2022, published by Duke University Press. If you haven't read this book, you need to, and Susie's on the cover. And my friend Myra's picture is inside. He is currently finishing a book of poems, Exemplars and Accomplices, about his time living in Chicago, and he's also a post-punk DJ. Welcome, Professor Rodriguez.
Hello. I am so excited to be here. And after Margaret, wow, I'm just like, I bought your book right after, we were chatting, and I'm going to buy 10 more. And then also, I'm just so excited to read after Juanita, and I'm just honored to be here with Michelle. So thank you all for coming. It's been a dream to read at Beyond Baroque. I could just ramble on forever and just see each one of you walk out of here as you get tired of hearing me. But in any case, as Juanita was saying, I'm finishing that book of poetry, and I'm also started writing a book. And Juanita inspired me. We did a little event in Riverside at the public library, and I was talking about how I ride the bus. I don't drive, and she mentioned a song by the Replacements, and that made it into as an epigraph to one of the chapters that I'm writing on this book about riding the bus and what it means as far as kind of seeing how seeing real people and experiencing those dynamics of poor and working people who don't drive, or can't afford to drive, and getting around by any means possible through public transportation. But in any case, this is kind of inspired by Juanita as well, who was talking about her idol of Sid Vicious. And when I came in, I met Genesis, who sold me a couple books, and she was saying that she just was drawn to the book instantly because Susie Sue was on the cover, and she was saying that she had the opportunity to see her at Cruel World, and so many people, particularly of a younger generation, had that opportunity, and in many ways she was an exemplary figure for previous generations from the 70s and 80s, and it's pretty heartwarming to see the impact that she's having on younger people, particularly young queer and trans and women like my niece, who and I can't wait to give her a copy of your book, Margaret, because that poem that you read about your daughter, I mean, that's my niece. And so she gravitated towards Susie because she's this rebellious figure and someone who is kind of like a very fuck you in your face, kind of person. And so, she's probably a bigger fan than I am. So what this book does is it tries to provide a cultural history of particular artists that influenced me as a teenager. But what I do is try to avoid all the academic garbage jargon that I absolutely hate, and try to infuse the book with my own personal experiences and how this music had a significant impact on me as a teenager, as well as continues to have a significant impact on me now as a 52-year-old. So I will read from the first chapter titled Red Over White, which is a B-side by Susie and the Banshees. Many of my friends whose teenage years have been marked by some form of trauma induced, for instance, by bullying, alienation, divorce, or poverty have told me there's a particular album that helped them weather their distress. Mine is The Cure's The Head on the Door, which helped me cope with a combination of the above-mentioned hardships. Initially led to the band by 3 songs in particular, The Walk, The Love Cats, Let's Go to Bed, all featured on the 1983 singles compilation Japanese Whispers that I received as a Christmas gift. The Head on the Door, purchased with lunch money banked for buying music in lieu of cafeteria food, tapped into and assisted in making sense of the despair that preoccupied me at the time. It was also The Cure, particularly the band's lead singer, Robert Smith, whom I credit for leading me to Susie and the Banshees. Indeed, I was thrilled to spot Smith in the video for the Banshees' cover of the Beatles' Dear Prudence that I fortuitously caught one day after school on Video 1, the music video program airing weekdays at 5 p.m. on KHJ-TV, Channel 9, and hosted by LA-based British DJ Richard Blade. Directed by Tim Pope and shot in Venice, Italy, the video showcased a band whose name I had stumbled upon in magazines and eventually read on t-shirts and stickers plastered on my peers' notebooks, Reggie in geometry, Javier in biology, but which I had not until then considered investigating. In a pre-internet era, investigating music often entailed blindly purchasing a record or a cassette based on the band's name alone, with the hope that the music heretofore unheard on the radio or some other media platform might personally reverberate after hitting the turntable or the tape deck. Alternatively, one's entryway into a band's musical oeuvre was made possible by a friend generously dubbing on cassette the records they or their siblings owned or borrowed. In some instances, a second-generation dubbed taped sufficed for securing one's fandom of an artist whose work really wasn't obtainable due to difficulty in procuring based on lack of money or record store availability. Music Plus around the corner couldn't compete with the selection at Tower Records in faraway El Toro. And I'm from Santa Ana. While my obsession with The Cure began to wane after The Head on the Door, to be quite honest, 1987's Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, with its much too jaunty first single, Why Can't I Be You, left me cold. It did, however, get transferred onto Susie and the Banshees for my deep appreciation of Hyena, the American version of the LP on which Dear Prudence appears, and their back catalog into which I subsequently dived. Moreover, I was drawn to Susie Sue herself in no small part due to her unapologetic display of unshaved armpits and icy disaffection in the Dear Prudence video, a visual analogy of sorts to the directive fuck off. Furthermore, the range and exuberance of her singing voice, enlivening but sarcastic on Slow Dive, distressed and breathless on Obsession, or frenzied yet bold on Monitor, resonated as a force that was as aggressive as it was empowering. Susie, in short, appeared to me at the right place at the right time. As if recounting my own personal history, Benjamin Harper, in his essay Black Eyeliner and Dark Dreams, writes, quote, "As a chubby, alienated gay teen, I was searching for someone, anyone, who could tell me being different was okay. When I saw Susie in her signature thick eyeliner and hair teased as if she had just stuck her finger in an electrical outlet, something clicked. This woman was a weirdo and completely unrepentant about it. I knew she was the one for me." In a similar vein, feminist journalist and music historian Lucy O'Brien corroborates, as she writes, "To me, then, an idealistic, sixth form innocent, timorous yet aching to enter the wild, strange, androgynous world she, in her coterie, seemed to signify, Susie was the one who knew, a woman who had surely been to the edge, nay, was living on it, study of which would somehow give us access. Although she was a lone woman among men, Susie to me symbolized a kind of sisterhood. And while drawn to the likes of The Jam and The Clash, Chicana punk icon Teresa Covarrubias, lead singer of the East LA band The Brat, notes, immediately the most striking were the women, Polly Styrene, Susie Sue, The Slits, these really wild women. To me, that was so encouraging. To see this whole wave of new music coming out with all these women was just amazing. That was what first got me thinking, hey, I can do that too. Now, it is precisely this rousing outsider connection to Susie, a bond shared by many women, queers, Latinas, Latinos, and Latinx queers. We are entranced, spellbound, that elucidates the post-punk transatlantic touch that guides this book. Now, I won't continue reading a bit anymore, but I will just say that what I do in this chapter is I talk about Susie's rise to prominence, and then also the interesting connections that she has with Latinx artists and musicians and fans in Los Angeles. She establishes a friendship with Kid Congo Powers, who grew up in La Puente, who Marlene Rios Hernandez just had the opportunity to be in conversation with, and which I unfortunately missed. And then also, various points in Susie and the Banshees' history where they're in conversation with Latino culture to some degree. And what I do is I end the chapter by talking about how I left graduate school for a year because I fell into a deep state of depression and thought I would never go back. And I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately, but I did. When I was living in Southern California, I moved back to Santa Ana. I was living with my grandparents in their garage. One of my best friends from high school, Alex, was starting to explore the S&M fetish scene, and he invited me to a club in Hollywood. And not thinking about what kind of club it was, we end up at this, fetish club, and I'm like terrified because I'm not terrified of much, but there's some bloodletting that's going on stage, and it's performance, and so I'm a little freaked out. And Alex is doing his thing, in some hideaway room, and I'm just standing there, not knowing where to look, and then all of a sudden I feel someone brush up against me, and I turn to my left or my right, I can't remember which, but standing there is Susie Sue and Budgie, and I dared not talk to them, but I nodded at Susie and she nodded back, and I thought that moment was a really important moment for me because it symbolized a way that she touched me, metaphorically, and not having to run the risk of meeting one's hero or heroine and then being disappointed in the process. It still was a significant moment. And so what this book is trying to do is to register the various kinds of touches that exist between these musicians and their fans. And so I'll just leave it there. Thank you so much.
That was beautiful. I'm a little teary-eyed. Thank you so much for that. It was amazing. So speaking of heroines, sometimes when you meet your heroes, they disappoint you, but Michelle has never disappointed me since I met her at AWP in 2017. Michelle Cruz Gonzalez is an English professor and the author of the memoir, The Spit Boy Rule, Tales of a Chicana and a Female Punk Band, which is taught in colleges and universities all over the United States. She has essays and fiction in anthologies by Putnam, PM Press, Seal Press, Literary Kitchen, and she has published online in long reads, the LA Review of Books, Latino Rebels, oh, I love that one, and Meet You. She recently completed a satirical novel about near-future California that succeeds from the U.S. and forces intermarriage between whites and Mexicanos for the purpose of creating a race of beautiful, intelligent, and hardworking people. She's currently at work on a screenplay. In the 1980s and 1990s, Gonzalez was a member of 3 all-women punk bands, Bitch Fight, Kamala and the Carnivores, and Spit Boy. Never interested in playing music with men. These are her words. I'm like, but brava. Gonzalez, primarily a drummer and lyricist, toured nationally and internationally with Spit Boy, whose lyrics focused on women and gender issues. In 2016, she published The Spit Boy Rule, Tales of a Chicana and a Female Punk Band. It's for sale, about her experiences as the only person of color in Spit Boy and what that was like in the predominantly white Bay Area punk scene. Gonzalez and Spitboy are featured in the 2017 documentary, Turn It Around, Story of East Bay Punk. Thank you, Michelle. Welcome. Oh my God, thank you. Is this water for me? Thanks. Thanks everybody, and thanks for everyone who organized, and thanks for being here today. This is really exciting. I hope I don't go too long. I have, I'm going to read actually a little bit from that novel, but first I'm just going to start with an excerpt from the epilogue of the Spitboy, or the prologue of the Spitboy Rule, and I'm going to kind of start right in the middle. I started listening for sounds of rebellion on my clock radio, the sounds of the Clash and the Go-Go's crackling their way through the single speaker. Later that year, my sister's middle-class grandparents bought me a knockoff Walkman. I recorded songs to a cassette player from the radio to absorb through the foam-covered headphones, and when I had saved enough babysitting money, I bought Prince Charming by Adam and the Ants. Adam Ant was my third celebrity crush, after Harrison Ford's Han Solo and Olivia Newton-John. But in 1983, I went to the US Festival to see The Clash, and Joe Strummer said something that made me forget about celebrity crushes, fickle chameleons who dress in costume and change their identity with every record. You make, you buy, you die. That's the motto of America. You get born to buy, and I'll tell you, those people in East LA, they ain't going to stay there forever. If there's anything going to be in the future, it's going to be all parts of everything. It's not going to be just one white way down the middle of the road. I felt like he was speaking directly to me, a Mexican-American from East LA, now living in a small town, bringing my version of Mexicanismo to our corner of the state. I went home straight after the third day of the festival. I was only 13 at the time. Cut my hair short and started paying more attention to the world around me and my place in it. I would show them. I would show my own mother, too. She still believed that Mexican girls should keep their hair long. I bought Aquanet, Maybelline eyeliner in black, the kind with the pointy red cap that I watched my Chola cousins in LA heat with a match before applying to the rims of their eyes, rimming the waterline, dark black, and penciling all around the outside too, enhancing the almond shape of their eyes with a long black wing. Tuolumne saw a shabby Mexican girl, a freak, so I was going to give them one. But I looked good too. I saw that the look suited me, enhanced who I really was, who my mom hoped nobody saw she might be, a Chicana from East LA, the person she covered up with the long jean skirts and macrame tops. Having much darker skin and hair than my mother, I couldn't pass. And maybe she wasn't trying to pass so much as trying to fit in somewhere where being a woman didn't have so many rules. So this is the opening of my memoir, The Spitboy Rule, which came out many years ago. I'm really lucky I continued to be able to do readings from it, and people ask me to talk about it, which is, I don't know, it's kind of weird, you know, that it's endured this long. It's made me really happy. I have been working on this other novel for like 10 years. I put that aside to finish this book, and it's finally done. And so, so Juana gave you a little synopsis. It is California Secedes from the United States. It's set in the near future. California secedes from the United States and kicks out all the people of color. And there's a dating site that's required, and it's called Combination Nation. And the protagonist, Marisol, she is about to turn 23, and that's when you have to combine. They call it combine, aka marry somebody who's white. So whites have to marry Mexicans, Mexicans have to marry whites for the purpose of creating a race of new, intelligent, and hardworking people. And all the other people of color have been kicked out of the state. In other portions of the novel, Marisol muses about other groups of people and reads online sites and is trying to stay really informed about what's going on in the rest of the world. So in this section, well, first, another thing to know about Marisol is that she's involved in a kind of a love triangle. She's supposed to be combining with this state guy, and she's actually just recently had sex with a Mexican goat herd who doesn't even rate high enough to be able to have a combination nation account. And so she finds out that he's in an activist punk band, and she goes to a punk show with him. So this is basically where we are in the novel. Marisol had never been to the neighborhood where Los Fugitivos Desaparecidos played. She'd only read about it. The RT didn't stop there. It was a neighborhood of abandoned lots and factories adjacent to a part of the city that the super developers didn't want to touch because it was still contaminated by a series of underground chemical spills that happened around the time of the secession. The streets were kept clean by the Republic through endless sweeps of homeless encampments and in an effort to maintain the illusion of Republic as provider, but the facades of the buildings appeared to be crumbling and in disrepair. Punk music was blasting through the sound system when they arrived to the warehouse, where Fugitivos were playing. The warehouse had been converted into an occasional underground club. It had graffitied tangerine-colored walls and a high ceiling lined with tattered tissue paper, papel picado, and fabric bunting with the names of what Marisol thought must be other bands: Ausencia, Trap Girl, El Condenado, and Los Crudos. I decided just to put real bands in the book, like why not, right? The papel picado with dancing skull cutouts reminded Marisol of what she had learned in an art history class about the Mexican Revolution. The textbook said that certain ethnic groups were not welcomed by the revolutionaries, like Chinese. The professor was Mexicana, Senora Flores, which is why her explanation of the expulsion had surprised Marisol and stuck in her head. She was sitting amongst the students in the circle of chairs that she had helped them create for the discussion. Her long black hair was piled high on her head, and it bobbed around as she spoke. Of course, expelling any group is never ideal, but one must appreciate the vulnerable position Mexico was in at the time of the development of its national character. The warehouse had a low stage at one end. It was loaded with amps, a drum kit, and several drums, congas, a cajon, and a large mexica drum, the kind used in Aztec dance ceremonies so common in the Republic. And there were people of all ages. There were a few combined co-eds and several Mexicano couples, too. It never occurred to Marisol that happily combined co-eds would disagree so much with the public that they could take a risk going all the way to see a band whose whole message lay in direct opposition. Some wore black jean vests with studs, buttons with band names on them, including Fugitivos. She saw several hand-painted Fugitivos Desaparecidos jackets, too. The majority of the crowd were Mexicanos, other goat herds, gardeners, field hands. Most of the combined co-eds were regular clothes, but they, as Moises, the singer, had suggested, did stand out a little. But no one seemed to care at all because just being there made you clandestine. Marisol later learned that people who dressed up too much at shows were assumed to be informants. As the Fugitivos set up, Marisol spotted a young Mexicano couple. They were no more than 16. The young man looked distinctly Mexicano to her, but he was light-skinned. The young woman had long black hair and a brown skin like hers. They went back and forth between kissing, leaning against the speaker, and standing by the stage holding hands. She wondered if they ever did that anywhere else. At their age, they were not yet required to register on Combination Nation, but they were supposed to be practicing co-eds. Moises came up behind her. See those two there? They met here. He squeezed her hand. I've never seen a couple like that before, she said, her eyes still on them. She couldn't help but stare even as they kissed, the young man's hand on his girlfriend's waist. Never? He pointed at himself and then to her with one finger. She pushed his finger away. We're not a couple. Mara and Naveen are children of co-eds, meaning one white and one Mexican parent. Moises put his hand on Marisol's back and whispered in her ear, not acting like hermanos at all, eh? So in this culture, Mexican kids are supposed to call each other hermanos as a way to inculcate them with the feeling that they're related and that they shouldn't be together. One white parent and one Mexicano, technically a couple like that could do whatever they wanted, but looking at them together, she knew it wouldn't be allowed. Moises nodded his head. This so-called combining thing isn't as clear-cut as the Republic expected. Marisol knew what he meant.
It was not a real secret that the Republic hoped to create people who were ethnically ambiguous, not light-skinned and not dark-skinned. The ideal was people with tans who had blue or green eyes, hardy and beautiful-looking, but not appearing to be permanently dark-skinned or particularly indigenous. They were like the people whom Marisol saw in fashion magazines when she was younger before the secession. Beautifully muted, people whose ethnicity didn't threaten anyone or call up fears or stereotypes. Moises said aloud what Marisol was already thinking. Combination Nation would never appear in Avin with her. The band waited for the sun to go down and the crescent moon to rise high in the sky before playing because it made it easier for people to leave quickly in the dark if the show was shut down. Suddenly, a ceiling projector that Marisol had noticed filled the wall behind the stage with scenes from what used to be the U.S.-Mexico border before it was moved back. Drone camera footage of miles and miles of border wall, a wide shot of the wall even extending into the water, a quarter mile into the ocean. At the beachfront, the camera dropped down along the Mexican side of the fence where people had graffitied messages. This is real video footage, by the way. Aquí rebotan todos los sueños. Everything is under control. Caution, ice ahead. Which way to freedom? With arrows pointing in all directions. And then the drone picked up speed. The fencing of the wall blurred as it neared the water. And then it was up and out over the waves. So in this section, the border wall goes into the water, down into the ocean, so people can't swim around. Because Moises stayed at her side and because Marisol had been so caught up watching the video, she hadn't focused on the Fugitivix instrumentalist until she heard Xochitl's guitar like an engine revving at the speed of the drone over the blue, ocean blue. Adel, the drummer, shouted, "Un, dos, tres," and Moises launched from Marisol's side straight onto the stage. Si pueden ir, pero si quieren quedar. They can go, but they stay anyways. Moises sang in Spanish, and Xochitl came in just behind him, singing in English. It was the other song that Marisol knew, Calicaca. No hay elección propio, solamente cadenas sin llave. No choices, just fake ones, and locks without a key. No amor propio, solamente odio. No true love, only hate. Calicaca, calicaca. After the first explosive song that Moises half sung and half spoke, he half sung and half spoke. We're all here esta noche para resistir a mental, economic, and regional imprisonment. He sounded out of breath. I'm cutting chunks out for time. This song is called Strangulation Nation, and Xochitl's guitar came in loud and fast with Moises's vocals. She joined us singing on the chorus. The crowd sang along too, undulating forward and back, fists in the air, some people simply dancing and singing to themselves along the edges of the stage. Marisol watched as Moises transformed in front of her from goat herd to singer, conductor of energy and anger. The muscles in his neck strained against his skin as he screamed each palabra, sweat beaded at his brow. It was like nothing she'd seen before. He was not exotic or suave or caliente. His anger so vivid and palpable that white women and white men too would be terrified, and with reason. After two more songs with the crowd singing along and a break in between, Moises went back to help Adel fix something on the drum set, and then he announced that they had a new song. La se llama Nuevo Gringolandia. It's about all we've lost, our culture, our language, our parents. It's about being put into orphanages and reprogrammed. Marisol swallowed hard. If you're old enough, close your eyes and try to remember your life the way it was before. Picture someone you love, someone who loved you, tu mamá, tu papá, una tía, tu abuelita. ¿De dónde tiraron a mi abuelita? Marisol hadn't closed her eyes. She kept them fixed on Moises, hoping not to cry there at the head of the stage. She held her breath. Where did they throw my grandmother? She had understood. Where did they throw my grandma? De donde tiraron a mi abuelita, he said again, and he wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand. Un, dos, tres, Adel counted and clicked their sticks together, and the whole band launched into Nuevo Gringolandia. Playing it amplified and live for the first time, Moises and Xochitl singing the whole song together. Xochitl's voice was higher, and she sang fast, the pitch of her voice cutting over the top of his baritone. Nos quitaron todo. Nos quitaron todo y nos llenaron con vergüenza. Nos quitaron todo y nos llenaron con mentiras. Nos quitaron la lengua y nos quitaron todo. Nos quitaron todo y nos llenaron con Grigolandia. There was a brief instrumental break, and Xochitl stepped forward and played a short guitar solo. At the end of the solo, Moises shouted at the crowd, "Otra vez, todos juntos, everyone together." Moved by music and the crowd, Marisol joined in, mouthing, singing, shouting the words. When Moises announced their last song, Xochitl invited everyone who wanted to join them on the stage for the song Curiosidad, a crudo song, a Latinx punk band from the 1990s. Xochitl had told her about them in the van. Marisol stayed close to the stage, but she did not get up there with the 25 or so young people who jumped in, and some crowded around the microphone stands, and others took a place behind one of the extra drums. The song opened with guitar feedback and a screechy sound pattern, and it lasted a total of 15 seconds. Moises wound his fist in the air. Una vez más. Xochitl repeated the guitar intro, and different people stepped up to take a turn to the microphones. Moises ended the song by repeating the line, Busca la verdad, busca la verdad, busca la verdad. I've never read that part anywhere before.
So if we have about 10 more minutes, we can do a quick Q&A. We're going to move the chairs up. If the readers could please come up briefly. Where's this one? He's hiding back there. Come into the light. Okay, closer, right here. Okay. Into the light. Let's give another hand for Michelle, by the way. That was freaking amazing. I want to see this movie. I have to buy this book. So as I said, I was talking about earlier, like I've been writing this book for 11 years, so it's really weird. Like, the book is really about loss. I'm not a fluent Spanish speaker because my mother unlearned her Spanish in kindergarten, because they didn't want her to speak Spanish, and the book is really about a loss of language. It's about it's a vehicle to be able to write about like microaggressions particularly for Latinx people, and so like over the course of 10 years, things have changed so much, but also there were times when I thought, oh, this book isn't really relevant anymore. And then all of a sudden it became uber relevant all over again in very similar ways, but also in these other more nuanced ways. I was writing like the kids or the Latino characters, the Mexicanos in the book, they always were put into orphanages, like they were taken from their family members, and their family members were, disappeared, and that was always a feature of the book. And then I was rewriting that section
during the summer when all the children were being taken from their parents and put into camps. And it was really, I was like, I don't know, like maybe I don't know if I could do this. Part of it because it was sad, but also just because it's weird to write a book that's in the future about things that are obviously things that already happened, like the putting indigenous children, native children into orphanages, and also writing about things that are happening now. I also just felt like, I don't know, like should I be writing about something that's so like present? But I talked to some people about it, writer friends and stuff. They're like, you just need to write the book that you're going to write, and then the times are going to be what they're going to be, and it's all gonna it's going to work out. And I just needed to just hear that. So. Wow, and that's all over the place. Sorry.
I remember her book in a much earlier form.
Yes.
So yeah. My book came out in June, so I hope it's still relevant.
Right? I mean, that's the problem.
But I will say it's it's a book of poetry, but it's also kind of a memoir in poetry of my daughter and I dealing with each other, as all mother-daughters do, but with this other layer on top of, fighting each other over ethnicity and identity and who wants to be what at any one time. And so for me personally, like I feel like my daughter and I are in a much better place in 2023 than we were in the book while we were still in the throes of identity and identity loss. But the feedback I'm hearing is that it's very much relevant.
You're also writing about climate, and that continues to be. I mean, talk about that, because that is really, really, really important. I mean, we keep having these cyclical fires.
The book I'm writing, the manuscript I'm working on now, which hopefully El Martillo Press will also want, is called Watershed, and it takes a lot into account about climate change and the identity of people displaced in communities that are tight-knit, rural communities, and then, all of a sudden people, you see Berkeley professors are like, you shouldn't live there anymore. And you're like, great, where do you want me to live? Right? So there's a lot of displacement of California communities, which I hope the next book really brings into focus.
Wonderful. That would be nice. Thank you for sharing. Just really quick, in my book, I had a sense of hope when I wrote the punk rock public defender book, and I've been sadly disappointed. Judges in Riverside are not following the new laws about bail should be basically illegal. Incarceration should be a last resort, not a first. So I urge everyone to donate to your local bail organization that will bail people out. I still have clients in jail on a misdemeanor vandalism, felony vandalism cases. And sometimes we went to a Jack in the Box and the window wasn't even broken on the takeout menu. It was just cracked and it was made of plastic anyways. What's that word? Someone spent 2 years of their life in an institution because of that Jack in the Box case. So I've been sadly disappointed. I think my book's more relevant than ever, but I don't really have any hope. I'm an abolitionist. I don't believe in this system. I think you have to start over, but I work within it because I love my clients. And you need good people working within a unjust system to try to do the best you can with what you have.
Yes, thank you. I'll just say that I had no idea what kind of reception this book would get. It's on a university press, and interestingly, I think it's received more attention outside of academia, which I'm so happy about. And I think a lot of, I don't know, I just get the sense that maybe it's just me being insecure or self-conscious that academics isn't a real academic book, and thank God. But it's been reviewed, or not even reviewed, but it's just been picked up by people that I would have never expected to, comment on it. And people have said, oh, this is a Southern California phenomenon. And so far, 2 pieces have come out about the resonance of the music on Mexicans and Mexican Americans in South Texas. And so I think, the music that I write about, and then just punk music in general, reverberates, beyond a specific geographical location, and people just make these assumptions that it's only relevant to specific urban spaces, but it's not. The music travels and it reaches people who are alienated or marginalized, and that's the source of that's the source material that gets them through. And I think that's been the most encouraging thing about this book, is people telling me that they can relate to it, and just really, really pleased that that's been the case.
Any more questions?
More like a comment. All of you said something that was relevant to my upbringing and one more, not even my upbringing later in life. I mean, you talked about Susie. I grew up in a family that was mixed Anglo-Jewish. My mom came here from Guadalajara when she was 15, and I was in this position where I'm always like, go to the family carne asada. Oh, there's Nathan, he's a pocho. Go to Dad's Christmas party. Oh, my grandma would say like really, really shitty things that she thought were complimentary. Nathan, aren't you glad you don't look Mexican? And I remember getting into punk music, and my cousin Lucci, she's like, see, this proves that you favor your white side. You like that white rock music. I'm like, that's not really true, because if you look at Spain in the 70s, they got Alaska y los Pegamoides, which is like that version of Susie. So, maybe I segued off the point, but you said that you could find some identity in the most unlikely places. That really touched me. And what you said about working in legal and not how it feels broken. I was a paralegal. I worked in tenant defense for a while. If you don't have the money to fight a landlord that owns probably like 100 properties, you're gonna lose. And that's why I started doing the books, because I felt like culture dictates perspective, and perspective dictates the way people vote. And what you said about freedom made me laugh my ass off. In my book, there's a part where there's these kind of like new age real estate cool like agents that are they dress like in Indian kurtas, and they got a wall mirror in the kitchen that's Frida Kahlo reimagined as the goddess Kali. It's made out of 100% organic Egyptian cotton, blah blah blah. It was only $400. You see that merch all over Alvera Street, and it's kitschy. It doesn't really make sense. And the premise of your story hit me hard, because that's. I have never felt like I have in a place like everyone's like, well, you belong with the whites. I'm like, well, no, because it's not like when I'm marketing my books, I could go to like some gentry hipster bookstore and still be like, hey Todd, can you put my book in your store? It doesn't work that way. They could kind of feel by osmosis that I don't come from that class of society. Alternatively, if I go to like the more like gente spaces, they're like, well, you don't belong here either. So that premise of putting both races together and creating an alternate acceptable race, like, I wish, because I feel like I'm always in the middle. I feel like Miklo and Blood Out my whole life.
Well, you're lucky, because I published in Spanish, and when I went to SPD, they told me English only. So my books are sitting there. I have two questions in one. I'm very interested in process, and I saw something that caught my attention immediately and drove me immediately to want to read your book, and it was the title. What prompted you to title the book the way you did? And the process, what was, it's always like a process that is only like having a child. Tell us a little bit about the process of writing the book and what prompted you to title it the way you did. For all this.
Oh. Well, I don't even think I said the title of my book, which is Republic of California, but I actually think that's kind of a bad title. I don't really know what I want to call my book now. I called it that for a long time because
I think because it sounded like a dystopian novel. Republic of California, for some reason, sounds like a dystopian novel to me. But I'm wondering. I don't really know what I want to call it now. So this what I read from is from an excerpt that I submitted to this contest, and it's called. I have actually titled this short excerpt Marisolandia. But you know, titles are tricky, and the thing about novels and a lot of publishers, not smaller publishers but big publishers, is like you can title your book whatever you want. Doesn't mean they're going to let you title it that. So I just try to spend more time on writing the book and getting it done.
I knew the Daughterland was the Daughterland right away, and I think the reason for that was because both my daughter and I, you know, we're living in the Sierra Nevadas in an area that we are not indigenous to, but it was affordable, and that's where my mother's lived. So we felt out of step. We were neither cowboy nor Indian, and that was like the mainstay of our town. And so I felt like calling it the Daughterland was giving it a land all its own. We weren't back down here yet, and so that just kind of encompassed like I'm in this different plane, and that's kind of how it came about, is thinking of it that way.
Portrait was easy. I always knew once I started the book that it would be based on James Joyce's Portrait of an Artist. James Joyce is one of my favorite writers. And then Tales of an Inland Empire Girl is based on Judy Blume's Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing. Michelle and I have talked about how much we read like Judy Blume. You know, I always say my book is a combination of Judy Blume and David Sedaris, and like maybe some punk rock person had a baby. And so, I mean, I always, process-wise, I took that picture that's on the cover of me and my sisters, and I had that up on a vision board maybe 15 years ago. And then that ended up being the cover, and I made a little mini book of it. It had a different title called Dysfunctional Tales from an Inland Empire Childhood. It went through so many titles, but I'm glad it ended up where it did. You know, I think it comes to you. You can change the title, but when it comes to you and you know it's right, it just feels right. I love titles. I'm a big headline and title person generally.
Yeah, the title of my book, A Kiss Across the Ocean, is the title of a culture club concert.
But
And
it's also a subtitle and something there that...
yeah, it's Transatlantic Intimacies of British Post-Punk and U.S. Latinidad, and it's a long title.
That's the academic part.
That's the academic part, yeah. But I like A Kiss Across the Ocean because what I was trying to do in the book is to talk about the mutual intimacies that exist between Latinx communities in the U.S. and these British musicians. And for me, the kiss kind of symbolized, you know, a form of intimacy that in order for, and I write in the introduction, in order for a kiss to be realized, it has to reach its intended target. And whether it's, you know, an actual kiss, a physical kiss, or if it's a kiss that's blown, it has to reach the target in order for it to, you know, realize its affective intention. And so I like the idea that there was this kind of intimate exchange that was taking place across the Atlantic Divide.
Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. Please go buy books. Michelle also has Spitboy t-shirts and some merch out there.
I have some free stickers, too.
Go to the bookstore and then go watch. Thank you to Bad Boys Dance Party for giving their time today. Thank you to all the organizations, and thank you to these readers. Macondo is an organization that was started by Sandra Cisneros at her kitchen table. It focuses on socially conscious writers of all races. So go to the Macondo website or email me and I'll send you all the information. It's a
The books are for sale.
yeah, so look up Macondo.